I was exhausted after a 96-hour training exercise. All I wanted was a hot shower and to see my family. So when I pulled into my own driveway, the last thing I expected was Karen from the HOA waiting for me, arms crossed with a printed-out violation notice. She told me my truck was non-compliant, that I was an eyesore. I tried to be polite, I really did. But when I refused to move it, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "We'll see about that," and pulled out her phone. She called the police on me, in my own home. I watched her give her statement to the responding officer, her voice dripping with fake sympathy about how some people just don't understand community standards. But then the officer turned to me, and everything went silent. He didn't ask for my license and registration. He didn't lecture me about HOA rules. He snapped to attention and saluted. The look on Karen's face, it was a mix of pure confusion and dawning horror. Because in that single moment, she realized her little power trip had just hit a wall dressed in civvies who outranked everyone on that lawn. She thought this was a battle over a parking spot. She was about to learn it was a lesson in respect. And folks, what happened next? What I decided to do with the full weight of my authority is something you have to see to believe. Have you ever had one of those days that just completely drains you? Not just a long day at work, but the kind of day where your bones feel heavy and your brain is just static. For me, that was last Thursday. I'd just come off a 96-hour high-intensity training exercise. My name is Alex Rourke, and I'm a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. For 4 days, I'd been running on caffeine, MREs, and about 6 total hours of sleep. My uniform was caked in a fine layer of dust and grit. My body ached in places I forgot I had, and all I could think about was my own shower, my own bed, and seeing my wife and 7-year-old daughter. The drive home was a blur. I navigated the familiar suburban streets of Crestview Meadows on autopilot. It's one of those picture-perfect neighborhoods, manicured lawns, identical mailbox designs, not a single blade of grass out of place. We moved here for my daughter, for the schools and the safe, quiet streets. The HOA, the Crestview Meadows Community Association, was just part of the package deal. A necessary evil, or so I thought. I pulled my dark gray Ford F-150 into my own driveway, the tires crunching softly on the gravel edging. It's a big truck, I'll give you that. It's seen mud, sand, and things I can't even talk about. It's not a show truck. It's a tool. And right then, it was my chariot carrying me the final 20 feet to paradise. I killed the engine and just sat for a second, my head leaning back against the headrest. The silence was glorious. I closed my eyes just for a moment, soaking in the fact that for the next 48 hours, no one was going to yell at me, no alarms were going to sound, and my biggest decision would be what to put on my pizza. That's when the peace was shattered. "Excuse me, sir." The voice was sharp, clipped, and dripping with a kind of passive-aggressive syrup I've come to recognize as the official language of busybodies everywhere. I opened my eyes. Standing on the sidewalk just at the edge of my property line was a woman. She was probably in her late 50s, dressed in immaculate athleisure wear with a severe blonde bob and oversized sunglasses perched on her head. She held a clipboard. Who uses clipboards anymore unless they're on a power trip? I forced a tired smile and opened my door. "Can I help you, ma'am?" She didn't return the smile. She strode forward with the confidence of a general inspecting his troops, her eyes scanning my truck like it was a biohazard. "I'm Brenda Walsh, Vice President of the Crestview Meadows Community Association." She said it like she was announcing she was the Queen of England. I just nodded. "Alex Rourke, nice to meet you." "The feeling is not mutual, I'm afraid," she said, her voice cold. She snapped a piece of paper from her clipboard and handed it to me. It was a pre-printed violation notice. "Your vehicle is in violation of community bylaws, Section 4, Paragraph C. No commercial, oversized, or improperly maintained vehicles shall be parked in driveways or on streets for a period exceeding 1 hour." I looked down at the paper, then back at my truck. It was registered as a personal vehicle. It was clean for the condition I'd just driven it through. "I'm sorry, there must be a mistake. This is my personal truck. I just got home." "That thing," she said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at my F-150, "is an eyesore. It does not conform to the aesthetic standards of Crestview Meadows. You will need to move it to a designated parking area or into your garage immediately." I sighed, the last of my patience thinning rapidly. "My garage is full of my family's belongings. And the nearest designated parking is half a mile away at the clubhouse. This is my home. This is my driveway." "This is a community, Mr. Rourke," she retorted, her smile tight and utterly humorless. "And we all agree to abide by the rules that keep it beautiful. Your disregard is noted." Can you believe the audacity? Have you ever had someone try to tell you what you can and can't do on your own property? Let me know in the comments if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare. I need to know I'm not alone in this. The front door of my house opened and my daughter, Lily, peeked out. "Daddy," she yelled, a huge smile on her face. That was it. That was all that mattered. I looked back at Brenda Walsh. Ma'am, I haven't seen my family in 4 days. I'm not moving my truck. You have a good afternoon. I turned my back on her and started walking towards my daughter, my little girl who was currently running down the path to jump into my arms. But Brenda Walsh wasn't finished. I see, she said, her voice dropping to a low, threatening purr. We'll see about that. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her pull out her cell phone. I heard her dial 3 numbers, and I heard her say, clear as day, yes, hello, police. I'd like to report a trespasser and a public nuisance. I froze, my daughter just a few feet away. She called the police. She actually called the police. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have lost your cool? Would you have tried to reason with her? I made a decision right then, a calm, calculated decision. I picked up my daughter, gave her a hug, and whispered, let's go inside, sweetie. Daddy needs to handle something. The game was on, and Brenda Walsh had just made her first and biggest mistake. Part 2 is ready, and you won't believe what happens when the police arrive. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on because this story is about to take a turn that will have you cheering. And if you've ever wanted to see a Karen get her comeuppance, you are not going to want to miss this. The next 5 minutes felt like an eternity. After ushering a confused Lily inside and handing her off to my worried wife, Sarah, I stood by the front window watching the scene unfold. Brenda Walsh had planted herself at the end of my driveway, a sentinel of self-righteousness, occasionally shooting a triumphant glance toward my house. She had called the police on me for parking in my own driveway. Sarah came up beside me, her hand on my arm. Alex, what is going on? She called the cops. Should we call a lawyer? I took a deep breath, the kind they teach you to take when you're in a high-stress situation and need to maintain operational clarity. No lawyer, I said, my voice quieter and steadier than I felt. Not yet. Let's see how this plays out. But your truck, it's just a truck. To us, yes, I said, my eyes still fixed on Brenda. To her, it's a symbol of disorder. A challenge to her authority. People like her don't see property, they see principalities, and she's decided this is her hill to die on. Can you understand that mindset? Have you ever met someone so obsessed with control that they lose all sense of perspective? It's a scary thing to witness. Then we saw it, the sleek, dark blue sedan with the Crestview Meadows Police Department insignia on the door. It rolled to a stop on the street behind my truck. My stomach tightened, a reflexive response to uniformed authority, even when I knew I'd done nothing wrong. A single officer stepped out. He was young, probably mid-20s, with a serious, professional demeanor. He adjusted his duty belt and walked toward Brenda, who immediately launched into her performance. And what a performance it was. From the window, I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language like a book. She was the picture of a concerned, law-abiding citizen. She gestured dramatically at my truck, then toward my house, her face a mask of pained exasperation. She probably used words like aesthetic blight and flagrant disregard. She handed him the violation notice from her clipboard. I saw the officer nod, listening patiently. Then he turned and started walking toward my front door. This was it, the moment of truth. Sarah squeezed my arm. Alex, it's okay, I said, and I meant it. A strange calm had settled over me. The fatigue was gone, replaced by a focused clarity. I've got this. I opened the front door just as the officer was about to ring the bell. He looked up, his expression neutral, ready for a standard neighbor dispute. Afternoon, officer, I said, stepping onto the porch and closing the door behind me to keep this away from my family. Good afternoon, sir, he began, his voice polite but firm. He glanced down at the violation notice in his hand. I'm Officer Miller. I'm here about a complaint regarding a vehicle parked in the drive. His eyes, which had been scanning the notice, flicked up to meet mine. Then they did a double take. They widened just a fraction. His professional demeanor didn't crack, but I saw the recognition dawn in his eyes. It's a look I've seen before, a rapid recalculation. He was no longer looking at just a civilian homeowner. He was looking at a senior officer. His posture straightened almost imperceptibly. The clipboard holding the violation notice lowered to his side. Sir, he said again, but the tone had shifted. It was laced with a new layer of respect. I apologize for the interruption. Is this your residence? It is, officer, I replied, keeping my voice even. My name is Alex Rourke. My family and I have lived here for 3 years. The truck is mine. I literally just returned from a multi-day training exercise and pulled into my own driveway not 20 minutes ago. I didn't need to say more. I didn't need to pull rank. The truth and the sheer absurdity of the situation was doing all the work for me. Officer Miller glanced back at Brenda, who was watching us with a smug, expectant smile, clearly anticipating my imminent citation. Then he looked back at me. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken understanding. He knew exactly what this was. One moment, sir, Officer Miller said, his voice quiet. He turned and walked back toward Brenda Walsh. What do you think was going through his mind at that moment? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to deliver bad news to someone who was utterly convinced they were in the right? The walk back to her must have felt like a mile. I stayed on my porch, arms crossed, watching. I saw Brenda's smug smile falter as Officer Miller approached her. She was expecting him to come back with my ticket or with me in cuffs for all I knew. Instead, he stopped in front of her and I saw him begin to speak, his posture formal, his gestures concise. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the effect. Brenda's face went from confused to disbelieving to a pale, stunned horror. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked from the officer to me and back to the officer. The clipboard, her symbol of power, hung limply at her side. The foundation of her little world was cracking, and she was just starting to realize it. The showdown is just beginning. What did the officer say to her that wiped that smug look right off her face? The moment you've been waiting for is in part 3, and it is even more satisfying than you can imagine. Don't go anywhere. Like and subscribe if you're enjoying this justice unfold. Officer Miller's walk back to Brenda Walsh was the longest 10 seconds of her life, I'm sure. From my porch, I had a perfect view of the entire drama unfolding. Her face, which had been a mask of smug anticipation, began to crumble piece by piece. First came confusion. Her head tilted as Officer Miller spoke, her brow furrowing as if she couldn't quite process the words. Then disbelief. She shook her head slightly, a small, dismissive gesture, probably thinking, no, you've got it wrong. He's the problem. But then Officer Miller said something else. He gestured toward me, not with an accusatory point, but with a respectful, open hand. And that's when the horror dawned. Her jaw went slack. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a ghost who'd just seen its own grave. Her prized clipboard slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the pavement, the papers scattering. She didn't even seem to notice. She just stared at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying understanding. Officer Miller left her standing there, a statue of shock, and walked back toward me. His steps were measured, his expression unreadable. When he reached the foot of my porch steps, he stopped. He looked up at me and the professional neutrality was gone, replaced by a look of profound respect. He didn't say a word. Instead, he straightened his back to a ramrod-straight posture, brought his hand up in a sharp, perfect salute and held it. The world went silent. In that single, silent gesture, everything changed. It wasn't just a greeting. It was a statement, an acknowledgement, a line being drawn in the sand. It communicated rank, respect, and a shared understanding of service that Brenda Walsh, in her world of clipboard violations and aesthetic bylaws, could never, ever comprehend. I returned the salute, a slower, more weary gesture, but just as sharp. "At ease, officer," I said quietly. He dropped his hand. "Apologies for the disturbance, Lieutenant Colonel. I've informed the citizen that there is no violation of law here and that this is a civil matter." I nodded. "Thank you, Officer Miller. I appreciate your professionalism." He glanced back at the still-frozen Brenda. "Is there anything else, sir?" "What would you have done? The power was right there in my hands. I could have asked for anything in that moment, but that's not who I am. That's not what this was about." "No, officer, that will be all. Thank you." He gave a short, sharp nod. "Have a good evening, sir." With that, he turned, walked to his patrol car, got in, and drove away, just like that. He left the two of us there, me on my porch, and Brenda Walsh standing amid her scattered papers, utterly and completely alone. The street was quiet again. The only sound was the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. Brenda slowly, mechanically, bent down to pick up her clipboard. Her movements were jerky, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. She gathered her papers, not looking at them, her eyes darting everywhere but at me. She had wanted a confrontation. She had wanted to win. But she had lost in a way she couldn't even quantify. She had been humiliated not by a shouting match, not by a legal loophole, but by a silent, respectful salute that had put her in her place more effectively than any fine ever could. She finally dared a glance in my direction. Our eyes met for a split second. There was no anger there anymore. Just shame and a flicker of fear. Without a word, she turned and walked away, her pace quickening with every step, desperate to escape the scene of her own utter defeat. I watched her go until she turned the corner and disappeared. I let out a long, slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was over. Or was it? Because as I stood there on my porch, the calm began to fade, replaced by a slow-burning ember of anger. This woman had trespassed on my property. She had harassed me the moment I returned from duty. She had frightened my daughter. She had involved the police in a fraudulent complaint, wasting city resources. A salute was a powerful message, but was it enough? Was true justice served? I looked down at my hands. I had spent my entire adult life following a code of honor, of discipline, of chain of command. Brenda Walsh lived by a different code, a code of pettiness and control, and I knew with a cold certainty that this wasn't over for her. This kind of humiliation wouldn't make her reflect. It would make her vengeful. So the question is, what would she do next? And more importantly, what was I willing to do? The immediate battle is won, but the war for the neighborhood is just beginning. What kind of revenge do you think a woman like that will try to plot? And what would you do if you were in my shoes? Share your own revenge ideas in the comments below. Part 4 is where the game changes completely. You won't believe the move I decide to make. The front door creaked open behind me. Sarah stepped out, her face a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. She wrapped her arms around me, resting her head on my shoulder. "I saw," she whispered. "The salute. Alex, I've never seen anything like that, but that woman, her face, she looked dangerous." I held her close, the familiar scent of her shampoo a stark contrast to the tension still hanging in the air. "I know," I said quietly. "Not over." Lily peeked out from behind the door. "Is the mean lady gone, Daddy?" I knelt down, my heart aching. "She's gone for now, sweetie, you don't need to worry." "But she made the police come. Are you in trouble?" Her big, worried eyes searched mine. "Can you imagine having to explain this to your child? The feeling of your home, your sanctuary, being violated by such pettiness. It lit a fire in me that the fatigue and the initial confrontation hadn't. "No, baby," I said, my voice firm and sure. "I'm not in trouble. The police officer was just reminding her about respect." But as I stood back up, meeting Sarah's knowing gaze, we both understood the truth. Respect had been asserted, but a war of attrition was coming. Brenda Walsh wasn't just going to slink away and never bother us again. People like her don't work that way. They fester. They plot. Later that evening, after Lily was safely tucked in bed, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Sarah sat across from me. "What are you thinking?" she asked. She knew that look on my face. "I'm thinking about chain of command," I said, staring into the dark liquid in my mug. "In our world, there's a structure, a process. Brenda operates outside of that. She's a guerrilla fighter in a war for suburban supremacy. You can't defeat an insurgency by just defending your own base. So what? We go on the offensive." Sarah's voice was cautious. "Alex, we have to live here. We have to think about Lily." "Exactly," I said, looking up at her. "I am thinking about Lily. I'm thinking about the kind of environment she's growing up in. I'm not going to let a petty tyrant make my daughter feel unsafe in her own home. This isn't about revenge. This is about establishing a permanent deterrent." I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen illuminated my determined face. I navigated past operational briefs and military databases to something far more mundane, yet potentially more powerful for this particular battlefield. The Crestview Meadows Community Association website. I found the governing documents, the bylaws, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the CC and RS. It was 100 pages of legalese about fence heights, mailbox styles, and the precise shade of beige you were allowed to paint your shutters. "This is her rulebook," I murmured. "This is the source of her power." "Are you going to try and find a loophole?" Sarah asked, leaning forward. "No," I said, a slow, strategic smile spreading across my face. "I'm not going to find a loophole. I'm going to study her entire playbook. I'm going to learn it better than she ever has. And then I'm going to use it against her." I spent the next 2 hours diving deep. I read about meeting procedures, election protocols, violation appeal processes, and the specific enumerated powers of the HOA board. I learned that the vice president, Brenda's position, was largely a ceremonial role with real power resting with the president, a man named Robert Gable, and the board as a whole. Then I found it. Article XII, Section 2, Recall of Board Members. A member of the board of directors may be removed from office, with or without cause, by a vote of the majority of the full membership of the association at a special meeting called for such purpose. A majority of the full membership, not just the people who showed up to meetings. That was a high bar. But it was possible, and I had a feeling Brenda Walsh had made more than a few enemies in Crestview Meadows. This was no longer about my truck. This was about the neighborhood's freedom. Brenda had declared war with a phone call to the police. I was about to answer with a petition, but how do you rally an entire neighborhood? How do you turn quiet discontent into a unified front? I looked at Sarah. "We're going to need to talk to the neighbors." She smiled, a real, genuine smile for the first time since I'd gotten home. "I'll make some cookies." The battlefield is set. The strategy is in motion, but can one man really take down an entrenched HOA queen? In Part 5, I go door to door, and what I discover will shock you. The secrets this neighborhood is hiding, you won't believe the stories they tell. Share this video with a friend who loves a good underdog story. The next part is where the rebellion begins. The next morning, Sarah was true to her word. The house filled with the warm, comforting smell of chocolate chip cookies. But this wasn't just baking, it was reconnaissance prep. As she packed them into neat containers, I studied a map of Crestview Meadows I'd printed, marking the houses I knew had had previous, visible skirmishes with the HOA. The Millers with their unauthorized garden gnome. The Garcias with their fence painted one shade too dark. But I was starting with my direct neighbors, Tom and Annette Carter, a retired couple on my left. They were the eyes and ears of the street. I walked over with a container of cookies, my heart pounding a little. This felt more vulnerable than facing down a hostile force. This was about asking for help. Annette answered the door, her face brightening when she saw the cookies. "Alex, Sarah's famous cookies, to what do we owe the pleasure? Just wanted to welcome myself back properly," I said with a smile. Tom appeared behind her and they invited me in. We made small talk for a few minutes, but then Tom, a blunt, kind man who used to be a union organizer, cut to the chase. "We saw the show yesterday with Brenda and the cop, hell of a thing." I took a breath. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. It's not really about the truck, it's about her." Annette's smile vanished. She exchanged a look with Tom. "That woman," she said, her voice low. "She fined us $200 because our garbage can was visible from the street on a non-collection day. It was behind the hedge," Tom grunted. "She's a menace, but what can you do? The board is in her pocket." "Old man Gable, the president, he just lets her run wild." "I was looking at the HOA bylaws last night," I said, leaning forward. "There's a way to recall a board member. It takes a majority vote of the entire neighborhood." Tom let out a low whistle. "A majority, that's a tall order. People are scared of her. They don't want to make waves." "Or they're just apathetic," Annette added. "They think it's easier to just pay the $50 fine and move on." "I think that's what she counts on," I said. "But what if the waves were already being made? What if people knew they weren't alone?" I told them my plan, not a loud, angry protest. A quiet, strategic campaign, a whisper network. We would talk to people, one house at a time. We would listen to their stories. We would show them that there was strength in numbers. Tom's eyes gleamed with a fire I hadn't seen before. "An organizer's approach. I like it. You know, the Petersons down the street. Brenda reported their son's lemonade stand for operating a business without a permit. The kid was 8. My stomach turned. Annette nodded vigorously. "And the Wungs, she threatened to have their dog deemed a nuisance animal because it barked for 5 minutes when a squirrel was in the yard. She records everything, Alex. She has a file on everyone." The picture was becoming clearer. Brenda Walsh wasn't just enforcing rules, she was cultivating a climate of fear. She was the self-appointed queen of a kingdom of quiet desperation. For the next 3 days, that's what we did. Tom and Annette came with me. We became a team. We didn't lead with anger. We led with cookies and a simple question. "Has the HOA ever given you a hard time?" And the stories, oh, the stories you guys would not believe. The floodgates opened. One couple showed us a violation notice for a non-conforming welcome mat. Another was cited for having a Christmas wreath up 2 days past the January 1st removal deadline. A young family was told their toddler's plastic tricycle had to be stored out of sight because it was not an approved decorative element. The pettiness was breathtaking, but more than that, it was the fear. People spoke in hushed tones, glancing out their windows as they told us their stories. They were prisoners in their own beautifully maintained homes. We weren't just collecting signatures, we were collecting testimony. We documented every single story, every unjust fine, every threatening note. We were building a case not for a court of law, but for the court of public opinion within Crestview Meadows. But here's the question I have for you. Have you ever been part of a community where one person held this much power through fear? How did you break it? Let me know in the comments, because we were about to put our plan to the ultimate test. By the end of the 3rd day, we had spoken to over 30 households, and we had uncovered something bigger, a secret that went beyond petty violations. One neighbor, a quiet man named Mr. Henderson, hinted that Brenda's power wasn't just about the rules. It was about something else, something financial. He wouldn't say more, just that we should follow the money. The rebellion was growing, but we were about to stumble into a much darker, more dangerous part of the jungle. The plot is about to thicken in a way you won't see coming. What is Brenda hiding? Part 6 dives into the shadowy finances of the HOA, and what we discover is more corrupt than any of us could have imagined. Share your theories in the comments and get ready. This is getting real. Mr. Henderson's words echoed in my mind. Follow the money. It was a classic piece of advice, as true in a suburban HOA as it is in any geopolitical conflict. Brenda's power wasn't just derived from fear, it had a financial component. But what? That night our core group, Sarah, Tom, Annette, and I huddled around my kitchen table. The map of Crestview Meadows was now covered in notes, a spiderweb of grievances and alliances. "Follow the money," Tom mused, scratching his chin. "But how? The HOA financials are distributed at the annual meeting, but Brenda just reads a summary, says everything's fine, dues are being put to good use. And everyone just accepts it?" I asked. Annette sighed. "Robert Gable, the president, just nods along. He's a nice man, but he's checked out. His wife has been ill, and I think Brenda handles everything now." "Which means she controls the information," Sarah said, her eyes narrowing. "She controls the narrative." "Exactly," I said. "So we need to see the real books, the detailed records." According to the bylaws, any member of the association has the right to inspect the financial records with reasonable notice. Tom let out a sharp laugh. You think Brenda's just going to hand them over? She'll bury you in paperwork and procedural nonsense. Not if we do it by the book, I said, a plan forming. We request it formally as a group. We make it so public and so official that ignoring us would be a violation of her own rules. We drafted a polite, meticulously worded email. It was from a coalition of concerned Crestview Meadows homeowners. We cited the specific bylaw, stated our desire to ensure financial transparency for the good of the community, and requested an appointment to review the last 3 years of detailed financial statements, including invoices, receipts, and bank statements. We sent it to Brenda Walsh and carbon-copied Robert Gable and every other board member whose email we could find. The response was faster and more venomous than we expected. It came only from Brenda. The financial records of the association are complex and confidential. Access is granted only for legitimate, specified purposes, not for frivolous fishing expeditions by a disgruntled minority. Your request is denied. She was hiding something. Her defiance was a confession, but we had anticipated this. Phase 2, I said to the group. The next morning, Tom and I went to see Robert Gable. He lived in a quiet cul-de-sac, his house neat but with a slightly overgrown garden, a testament to his preoccupation. He answered the door looking tired, but his eyes were kind. Tom, Alex, he said, surprised. What can I do for you? We're concerned about the financial health of the association, Robert, Tom said, his voice gentle but firm. We sent a formal request to review the records and Brenda denied it. Robert's shoulders slumped. Look, fellas, Brenda handles all that. She's very thorough. I'm sure the books are fine. With all due respect, sir, I interjected, using a tone I'd often used with reluctant junior officers. Thoroughness and transparency aren't the same thing. Denying homeowners their legal right to inspect the records is a serious matter. It creates distrust. It makes people wonder what there is to hide. I saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. The military bearing, the calm authority. It had an effect. He was a man who understood hierarchy, and right now I was speaking with the confidence of someone at the top of one. I'll talk to her, he said weakly. Thank you, Robert, I said, but we need more than a talk. We need access. The community deserves to know where their money is going. Don't you agree? He looked from my face to Tom's, and the weight of his own neglected responsibility seemed to settle on him. He nodded slowly. Come to the clubhouse tomorrow at 10. I'll ensure the records are available. We had our foot in the door. The following day, we walked into the HOA clubhouse. Tom, Annette, Sarah, and I. Brenda was there, seated at a long table, a stack of binders in front of her. Her face was a thundercloud. Robert Gable sat beside her, looking deeply uncomfortable. The records, Brenda snapped, gesturing to the binders as if they were toxic waste. For the next 4 hours, we dug. It was tedious work. Line items for lawn care, pool maintenance, streetlight repairs. At first, everything seemed in order, but then Annette, who had been an accountant for 40 years, found it. This is odd, she murmured, her finger tracing a line. This invoice from Premier Landscaping. It's for $5,000 for seasonal floral installation. So, Brenda said, her voice tight. So, Annette said, not looking up, I happen to know that Maggie Peterson, 2 streets over, owns Premier Landscaping. She told me last week that the HOA canceled its contract with her over a year ago because her prices were too high. The room went still. We cross-referenced. We found multiple invoices from Premier Landscaping totaling over $20,000 in the last year alone. But Maggie Peterson had no record of any work done for the HOA after her contract was terminated. The company was a ghost. The money was going nowhere. Brenda had been embezzling HOA funds. She saw the realization dawn on our faces. The color drained from her own. Her kingdom wasn't built on rules and aesthetics. It was built on theft. The stakes just went from a neighborhood feud to outright fraud. What would you do with this kind of evidence? Confront her? Go to the police? Part 7 is where the trap is sprung, and the final, shocking confrontation will leave you speechless. Smash that like button if you're on the edge of your seat. The endgame is next. The air in the clubhouse was thick enough to choke on. The 4 of us stared at Brenda. Robert Gable looked from the fake invoices to Brenda's ashen face, his own expression crumbling from confusion to dawning horror. Brenda, he whispered, his voice cracking. What is this? Brenda said nothing. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the damning papers in Annette's hand. The meticulous, controlling queen of Crestview Meadows had been caught, and the sheer, undeniable proof had stripped her of all her weapons. There were no bylaws to cite, no procedural tricks to hide behind. This was theft, plain and simple. This is fraud, Robert, I said, my voice calm and low, the voice I used when a situation had gone from volatile to definitive. A significant amount from the looks of it, invoices from a company that hasn't worked here in over a year. Tom, never one for subtlety, leaned forward, his fists clenched on the table. You've been stealing from your own neighbors, from us, to pay for what? Your fancy lawn ornaments, your designer sunglasses. Brenda finally found her voice, but it was a shrill, desperate thing. This is a mistake, a clerical error. You have no right. We have every right, Sarah interrupted, her tone icy. She had been quiet, but now she spoke with the fury of a mother protecting her home. You harassed my husband, you frightened my daughter, and now we find out you're a thief. The only mistake was ever letting you have any power. I looked at Robert Gable. The man seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The full weight of his negligence was crashing down on him. Robert, I said, pulling his gaze away from the train wreck that was Brenda. As president of the board, what is the protocol here? He swallowed hard. I have to call an emergency meeting of the full board tonight, and we have to vote to remove her from her position immediately, and then we have to contact the police. At the word police, Brenda flinched as if she'd been struck. The same weapon she had so gleefully used against me was now being aimed back at her. The poetic justice was undeniable. The emergency board meeting was held that evening in the same clubhouse. It wasn't just the board who showed up. Word had spread like wildfire through our Whisper network. The room was packed. The Petersons, the Garcias, the Wungs, dozens of families I'd spoken to were there, their faces a mixture of anger and grim satisfaction. The vote to remove Brenda Walsh as vice president was unanimous, even from the board members who had previously been her allies. When Robert Gable announced the result, a collective sigh of relief followed by a low murmur of vindication rippled through the room. But it wasn't over. As Brenda gathered her purse to flee, I stood up. "A moment, Brenda," I said, and the room fell silent. All eyes were on me. She froze, her back to me. "You tried to use rules and authority to bully people," I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. "You thought that clipboard and a police call were the ultimate power, but you forgot what real authority is. It's not about control. It's about responsibility. It's about serving the people you represent, not terrorizing them." She turned slowly, her face a mask of shame and hatred. She had nothing left to say. "You're right that this is a community," I continued, looking around at my neighbors. "And today this community took its power back. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to list my rank or my title. The victory belonged to everyone in that room. As Brenda scurried out the door, defeated and disgraced, the room didn't erupt in cheers. It was something better. It was a quiet, solid sense of justice, finally served. The next day, Robert Gable, accompanied by Tom and myself, formally turned over all the financial evidence to the police. A detective took our statements, his eyebrows rising as we laid out the story. The investigation into Brenda Walsh had begun. I walked back to my house, to my driveway where this had all started. My truck was parked right where it belonged. It wasn't an eyesore. It was a symbol of a battle fought and won. But was the war really over? With Brenda gone, what would become of our neighborhood? The story wasn't quite finished. There was one final, unexpected chapter waiting to be written. The corrupt queen has been dethroned, but who will take her place? The final part of this incredible story is next, and it ends with a twist that will restore your faith in community. Subscribe so you don't miss the satisfying conclusion to this HOA nightmare. In the days that followed, Crestview Meadows felt like a different place. It wasn't just the absence of Brenda Walsh's prowling silhouette. It was a shift in the atmosphere. The air felt lighter. People lingered on their porches, chatting with neighbors they'd previously only waved to nervously. Kids played in front yards without their parents anxiously checking for HOA violations. The wall of fear had been torn down, but a power vacuum remained. The HOA board was in disarray, and the annual meeting was just a month away. Robert Gable, humbled and remorseful, officially resigned as president, citing a desire to focus on his family. The neighborhood was at a crossroads. We could fall back into old patterns, or we could build something new. That's when the nominations started. It began with Tom Carter. He stood up at a casual neighborhood potluck, an event that would have been unthinkable a few weeks prior, and cleared his throat. "I've lived here for 15 years, he said, his voice strong and clear. "I've seen this neighborhood go from a community to a dictatorship. We got a taste of what it means to stand together, and I don't want to lose that. So I'm nominating Alex Rourke for HOA president." The applause was immediate and thunderous. I was stunned. I looked at Sarah, who was beaming with pride, and then at the sea of hopeful, determined faces. The Garcias, the Petersons, the Wungs, they were all nodding, clapping, looking to me. But this wasn't a military operation. This was a community, a different kind of unit. I stood up, and the crowd quieted. "I am deeply honored," I began, my voice thick with an emotion I rarely showed. But this fight was never about me taking charge. It was about all of us taking charge. I saw something incredible these past few weeks. I saw Tom's strategic mind, Annette's forensic accounting skills, and the quiet courage of every single person who finally said, "Enough." I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as I could. A good leader doesn't command, he serves, he listens. So I will accept the nomination on one condition. We don't just replace the old board. We transform it. I want a board of directors that represents every street, every opinion. I nominate Tom Carter as vice president to handle community outreach. I nominate Annette Carter as treasurer to ensure our finances are an open book for everyone to see. Let's build a board that serves this community instead of ruling it. The vote at the annual meeting wasn't even close. It was a landslide. Our new, diverse slate of candidates won every seat. Our first official act was to pass a series of reforms we called the Homeowners' Bill of Rights. It limited the power of individual board members, created an independent committee to review all fines, and mandated full financial transparency, with all records available online. We repealed the most petty and oppressive bylaws. The rules about non-conforming welcome mats and toy tricycles were scrapped. The focus shifted from punishing minor infractions to fostering a genuine sense of community, organizing block parties, and creating a neighborhood watch that actually watched for real dangers, not aesthetic crimes. As for Brenda Walsh, the police investigation led to formal charges of embezzlement and fraud. Facing the overwhelming evidence, she accepted a plea deal. She sold her house and moved away, a permanent footnote in the history of Crestview Meadows. I stood on my porch one evening looking at my truck parked proudly in the driveway. My daughter Lily was drawing on the pavement with chalk, a bright, vibrant sun unafraid of violating any color palette rules. Sarah came out and stood beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "You did it, you know," she said softly. "You gave them their home back." "We did," I corrected her. "This was a team effort. It always is." This whole journey started with a salute, a symbol of respect and rank. But it ended with something far more powerful, a handshake between neighbors, a shared potluck, and the simple, profound peace of knowing you are safe in your own home. So what's the moral of the story? Is it that you shouldn't mess with a senior military officer? Maybe. But I think it's something deeper. It's that tyranny, no matter how small its kingdom, cannot stand against a united community. That respect will always, always triumph over blind authority. And that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on distant fields, but right in your own driveway. This story is over, but the conversation isn't. What did you think of the ending? Have you ever been part of a community that came together to overcome a common problem? Share your own victory stories in the comments below. Let's celebrate justice together. And if you loved this tale of neighborhood justice, share this video with your friends and family. Until next time on HOA Nightmares.